The desert did not kill a man all at once. It peeled him apart. First it took the spit from his mouth. Then it cracked his lips, until every breath tasted like copper. Then it baked the thoughts right out of his skull, leaving only one word rolling around in the empty space behind his eyes: water. Silas had been walking for 2 days without any. By noon of the second day he had stopped sweating. That scared him more than the buzzards. The birds had been following him since morning, 4 black shapes circling slow against the white-hot sky. They knew something he did not want to admit yet. They knew his boots were dragging deeper in the dust. They knew his shadow was getting shorter, weaker, less like a man and more like a stain. His horse was gone. His canteen was empty. His revolver hung loose against his thigh, with no bullets left in the cylinder. A week earlier, he would have laughed at any man who called him helpless. Silas Creed had been a gun hand, a hired rider, a hard man with hard eyes, and no habit of asking permission. Now he was crawling toward a windmill that might not even work. He saw it first through a shimmer of heat. A thin wooden tower leaned crooked against the horizon, its broken blades turning only when the wind remembered them. Beneath it sat a low farmhouse, sunburned and gray, with a barn sagging on one side and a split-rail fence that had given up pretending it could keep anything out. A ranch, or what was left of one. Silas stopped walking and stood there with his hands on his knees, swaying. His tongue felt too big for his mouth. His throat had closed down to a raw, dusty tube. The place might have people. People had guns. People did not give water to strangers who looked like him, and Silas knew exactly what he looked like. His hat was stained dark with sweat that had dried days ago. His beard was full of dust. His shirt was stiff with salt and blood from a cut along his ribs that had reopened twice. His face had been burned red, then brown, then nearly gray. A man like him walking up to a ranch house did not look like a guest. He looked like trouble, but there was a well. He could see the stones now, round and old, sitting about 30 yards from the house. A bucket rested beside it. A rope hung down into the dark. The sight hit him so hard his knees almost folded. He did not go to the door. He went to the well. Every step became a bargain. 10 more feet and he could quit. 5 more and he could fall. 1 more and maybe God, if he was still paying attention to this piece of burned country, might let there be water at the bottom. Silas reached the well and grabbed the stone rim with both hands. The stones were hot enough to burn his palms. He leaned over and looked down. Darkness. He dropped the bucket. The rope hissed through his cracked fingers. The bucket fell a long way, then hit with a hollow wooden thud. Not a splash. Silas closed his eyes. For a second, there was no anger in him, no fear either, just a deep, empty understanding. Of course the well was dry. Of course he had spent the last of himself walking toward a hole in the ground. He laughed once, but it came out like a cough. Then he heard the hammer click. Step away from that well. The voice came from the porch. A woman's voice, flat, tired, not frightened. Silas turned slowly. She stood in the slice of shade under the porch roof, holding a Winchester rifle across her body. She was small, or maybe the heat made everything look thin and far away. Her dress had faded from blue to something closer to smoke. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbows. Her hair was tied back, but loose strands clung damply to her face. Her eyes were steady. That was the first thing Silas noticed. Not soft, not welcoming, not cruel. Steady. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. The woman looked him over. She saw the empty canteen. She saw the revolver. She saw the way he was holding himself upright by force of pride alone. "You sick?" she asked. Silas shook his head. Bit? Another shake. Shot? He tried to answer. His throat scraped. No. The word barely existed. She lowered the rifle an inch. Not enough to mean trust. Just enough to mean she was thinking. That well's near dry, she said. You pull mud out of it, you'll ruin what's left. Silas stared at her. The woman sighed like he was one more chore in a day already full of them. How much water can you drink before you die? He blinked. She stepped back into the house and came out with a tin cup. She crossed the yard without lowering the rifle completely. When she reached the pump beside the kitchen wall, she worked the handle. It groaned, coughed, and finally spat a thin stream into the cup. Not much, but enough. She walked to him and held it out. Silas looked at the cup the way a starving man looks at bread. Slow, she said. You gulp it. You'll throw it up. Then I'll have wasted good water on a fool. His hand shook when he took it. He drank too fast anyway. The water hit his tongue warm and metallic, with a faint taste of rust, and it was the best thing he had ever had in his life. His stomach cramped immediately. He doubled over, choking. I said slow, she muttered. He tried to hand the cup back, but his fingers would not open. She took it from him and went back to the pump. This time she gave him half a cup. Sit. He sank down beside the well because standing had become too complicated. The woman stayed a few feet away, rifle in one hand, cup in the other. What's your name? She asked. Silas wiped his mouth with the back of his wrist. Silas. Silas what? He hesitated. Creed. Something moved behind her eyes. Not recognition exactly, but caution sharpening into shape. I've heard that name. Most folks have heard something. Most of it bad. He did not answer. She gave him the cup. My name's Mara Vale, she said. That house is mine. The well is mine. The mule is mine. Anything you think about stealing is mine. Silas drank more carefully this time. I was only after water. Men say only right before they start taking more. He looked up at her. The sun sat behind her shoulder, turning her into a hard black outline. I'll go when I can stand. No, she said. Silas frowned. You'll go when you've paid for what you drank. He almost laughed, but his ribs hurt too much. With what? She pointed toward the windmill. The leather belt's cracked. The trough leaks. North fence is down in 2 places. Barn door won't close unless you lift it with your knee. You drink my water, you give me work. Silas looked toward the fence. The posts leaned like bad teeth. The trough under the windmill had a split running nearly its whole length. The barn door hung crooked from one rusted hinge. This place is falling apart, he said. Mara's eyes narrowed. Then you ought to have plenty to do. He stared at her for a long moment. A smarter man might have kept his mouth shut. Silas had never been accused of being smart at the right times. You always hire dying men? No, Mara said. But healthy ones cost money. She turned and walked back toward the house. Silas watched her go. Her shoulders were straight, but not because she had strength to spare. Because if she let them drop, the whole place might drop with them. At the porch, she looked back. There's shade by the barn. Lie down there. If you pass out in the yard, I'm not dragging you. He believed her. So he crawled into the shade like an old dog and slept with his back against the barn wall. When he woke, the sun had moved and his headache had settled behind his eyes like a hot nail. A plate sat beside him, beans, dry cornbread, and 2 strips of bacon cooked hard enough to crack. No note, no kindness wrapped around it, just food. Silas ate with both hands. He tried to slow himself, but hunger did what thirst had done. It stripped the manners off him. He cleaned the plate with the cornbread and licked salt from his thumb. Mara watched from the porch. He pretended not to notice. By evening, he could stand without the world tipping sideways. Mara gave him a coil of wire, a hammer, and a bucket of nails. "Fence first," she said. "Coyotes got one of my hens last night." Silas looked at the sky. The sun was already dropping, but the heat still pressed against the land. "You want it done now?" "I wanted it done last month." That was how it began. Not with trust, not with gratitude, not with two lonely people seeing something tender in each other. It began with a busted fence, and a woman who measured mercy by the amount of work a man could still do after receiving it. Silas fixed the north fence by moonlight. His hands blistered where old calluses had cracked. His ribs pulled every time he drove a nail. More than once he had to stop and lean his forehead against a post until the dizziness passed. The night insects screamed in the dry grass. Somewhere beyond the pasture, a coyote yipped, then another answered. When he finished, he walked back to the house and found Mara sitting on the porch with the rifle across her lap. "You sleep with that thing?" he asked. "Not when I'm awake." He stood at the bottom of the steps, too tired to laugh. "Fence'll hold." She nodded. "There's a blanket in the barn. Don't smoke near the hay." "I don't smoke." "Good. One less stupid habit." She went inside and shut the door. Silas slept in the barn that night, on a pile of feed sacks that smelled of dust and mice. He kept his empty revolver under his hand, because habits were harder to kill than men. He told himself he would leave in the morning. At sunrise, he found the wagon wheel cracked. It leaned against the side of the barn, one spoke split clean through. Mara was at the pump, filling a basin with the same slow, careful rhythm she used for everything. Silas stood there a minute. Then he found wood glue, rawhide strips, and an old clamp hanging from a peg. Mara did not ask what he was doing. He did not offer an explanation. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, the wheel was braced and bound tight. It was not pretty, but it would roll. Mara came over, looked at it, then looked at him. "You leaving?" she asked. Silas wiped glue from his fingers. "That depends." "On what?" "Whether that windmill belt is as bad as you said." "It's worse." He nodded once. "Then I guess I'm not leaving yet." Mara said nothing. But later, when he came down from the windmill tower, with his shirt soaked through and his hands black with grease, there was a cup of water waiting in the shade. Not full. Nothing on that ranch was ever full. But it was there. Days stretched into a week. The heat did not break. It only changed shape. Morning heat came pale and sharp. Noon heat came white and heavy. Evening heat rose from the ground in waves, as if the earth itself had a fever. Silas learned the ranch by what was broken. The trough leaked from the east corner. The chicken coop door needed a new latch. The barn roof had 3 soft spots. The mule, a gray old sinner named Prophet, bit anyone who moved too fast near his head. The kitchen step had a loose board. The pump handle stuck unless you lifted before you pushed. Mara knew all of it. She kept the place alive through pure refusal. Every morning she counted eggs, checked the water barrel, fed the mule, measured flour, and scanned the horizon before breakfast. She did not waste words. Words, like water, were used only when needed. Silas understood that. He had lived for years in places where talking got a man noticed, and being noticed got him killed. They ate in silence most nights. Mara sat at one end of the table. Silas sat at the other, too big for the chair, shoulders hunched so he would not feel like he was crowding the room. The house smelled of cornmeal, hot iron, dust, and the faint bitter scent of coffee stretched too thin. One night, she put a jar of peach preserves on the table. Silas stared at it. "What's that for?" "Eating. I know what it's for." "Then why ask?" He picked up the jar carefully. The label had long since washed off. Inside, the peaches glowed amber in the lamplight. Seems like something you'd save. I did save it. For what? Mara took a bite of cornbread. For when I got tired of saving it. That was the most personal thing she had said to him in 7 days. He spread a small spoonful on his bread and ate slowly. The sweetness startled him. For a second, he was a boy again, sitting in his mother's kitchen before war and hunger, and men with money had taught him how cheap a life could be. Mara noticed him go still. She said nothing. He was grateful for that. By the second week, Silas had stopped counting the days until he left. He told himself it was because the work was not finished. The well needed deepening. The pasture fence still needed posts. The smokehouse door had warped. Mara's wagon would not make it to town unless he reset the axle. There was always another reason. That was the danger of a place like that. A man could nail down one loose board, then see the next one. He could patch one leak, then hear another drip. He could tell himself he was leaving tomorrow, until tomorrow became part of the house. Mara never asked him to stay. She never asked for much of anything. She stated problems and left them in the air. South trough's dry. The beans need poles. Something's been digging under the henhouse. Storm took shingles off the back roof last spring. Silas would grunt, finish his coffee, and handle it. He began rising before dawn to pull water while the air was still cool. He would fill the kitchen barrel first, then the trough, then the basin by the pump. One morning, he found a wet cloth folded on the porch rail beside his gloves. It had been soaked and wrung out, ready for his neck when the sun climbed high. Mara did not mention it. Neither did he. That cloth said more than either of them could have survived hearing out loud. The first time he saw her cry, she was not making a sound. It was late afternoon. Silas had been repairing the barn door. The sky had turned a hard yellow, and thunderheads stood far off in the west without moving closer. The air smelled like rain that had changed its mind. He came around the side of the house carrying a plane and a handful of wood shavings when he saw Mara by the small fenced graveyard behind the smokehouse. There were 3 graves. 2 were old, marked by stones with names weathered almost smooth. The third had a wooden cross, Caleb Vale. The date was less than a year old. Mara stood in front of it with her hands at her sides. She was not kneeling. She was not speaking. Her face was dry except for one tear that had cut a clean line through the dust on her cheek. Silas stopped. A decent man would have gone away immediately. Silas had not been decent in a long time, but he knew enough not to step closer. Mara turned her head slightly. "You need something?" she asked. Her voice was normal. Too normal. "No." "Then quit standing there." He left. That night at supper, the silence had weight. Silas looked at the empty chair near the stove. He had seen it before, but now he understood it. The chair was not spare furniture. It was an absence with legs. "Your husband?" he asked. Mara's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. He regretted the question as soon as it left him. She set the spoon down. Fever took him. Silas waited. Mara looked at the lamp flame. He cut his hand on a rusted pump bolt. Small cut. Didn't think much of it. Men never do. By the 3rd day his arm was swollen. By the 5th he didn't know where he was. By the 7th he was gone. Silas said nothing. "I buried him before the ground froze," she continued. Then Fletcher's men started coming around. "Fletcher, Elias Fletcher, owns half the county and wants the other half. What's he want with this place?" Mara gave him a tired look. "Water." Silas thought of the dry well, the weak pump, the careful cups. "Doesn't seem like you have much." That's because you're looking at the top. She stood, took both plates, and carried them to the basin. There's a deep vein under this land. Caleb found it years ago. Never had the money to drill proper. Fletcher knows, or thinks he knows enough. And he wants you gone. He wants me reasonable, she said. Men like him always call it reasonable when they're tired of waiting to steal. Silas leaned back. The chair creaked under him. Mara heard it and glanced over. You break that chair, you fix it. He almost smiled. Yes, ma'am. Her back stiffened at the word, not with offense, but with memory. Don't call me ma'am. All right. She scrubbed the plate harder than she needed to. Silas watched the lamplight catch on her bare left hand. No ring. He had noticed that before, too. Now he knew where the ring had gone. Buried, maybe. Or hidden in a drawer she never opened. The next morning, Silas started deepening the well. It was mean work. He rigged a pulley from old tack and a wagon chain, then lowered himself into the dark with a pick, shovel, and bucket. The stones sweated heat at the top and held damp cold below. He chipped through packed clay and rock, while Mara hauled up buckets one at a time. They worked without talking. Pick, scrape, fill, rope creak, bucket rise, bucket empty. Again. By noon, the sun stood straight above the well mouth, shining down like a judgment. Silas's shirt clung to his back. Mud streaked his arms. His ribs had started to throb where the old cut had not healed clean. He ignored it. Pain was information. It did not have to be obeyed. By the third day in the well, the cut along his ribs had turned hot. He had gotten it before reaching Mara's place. A knife slash from a drunk outside a border town who thought an empty pistol meant an easy target. Silas had wrapped it himself and kept moving. Most wounds closed if you gave them enough time and didn't look too close. This one had not. The well made it worse. Damp clay got under the bandage. Sweat soaked it, dust dried over it. Every time he swung the pick, the wound pulled open a little more. By evening, fever sat behind his eyes. Mara noticed before he did. You're leaning. Silas dropped a bucket of clay near the well. No, I'm not. You are. Ground's uneven. The ground has been uneven all week. You started leaning today. He reached for the rope. I'm fine. Men say that right before they fall over and become my problem. He turned toward her, irritated, and the yard tilted. Only for a second, but Mara saw it. Her face hardened. Inside. No, inside Silas. The way she said his name stopped him more effectively than the rifle ever had. He took 2 steps toward the house and almost made it to the porch before his knees loosened. He caught the rail with one hand. The wood dug into his palm. Mara was beside him fast. She did not put an arm around him. She was too small to hold him up and too practical to pretend otherwise. Walk or crawl, she said, but get through that door. He walked, barely. Inside, the house was dim and cooler than the yard, but the air still pressed on him. He sat on the edge of the bed, in the corner, because she pointed at it. His vision pulsed dark at the edges. Shirt off, Mara said. Silas looked up. No. She gave him the kind of stare that could dry paint. You modest now. It's nothing. Then it won't mind being looked at. He did not move. Mara stepped closer. Her voice dropped. I watched one man die because he thought a scratch was nothing. I won't watch another. That went through him clean. Silas unbuttoned his shirt with fingers that did not feel like they belonged to him. When he pulled the cloth away from his ribs, the bandage came with it in a wet strip. Mara's jaw tightened. The wound was angry and swollen, the edges red, the center leaking yellow. Dark bruising spread beneath the skin. It smelled wrong. Mara turned away at once and put water on the stove. "Lie down." Silas stayed sitting. "Mara, lie down. I've had worse." "No," she said, grabbing a bottle from the shelf. "You've survived worse. That isn't the same thing." He lay back. The ceiling beams swam above him. She moved around the kitchen with a frightening calm, gathering clean cloth, lye soap, a needle, thread, a knife, and whiskey from a brown jug under the sink. Silas watched the whiskey. "That for me?" "Some." She poured half a cup and handed it to him. He drank. It burned all the way down and landed badly in his empty stomach. Mara washed her hands until the skin went pink. Then she washed the wound. Silas gritted his teeth. When the hot cloth touched the cut, he nearly came off the bed. "Hold still." "I am holding still." "You are shaking the whole bed." "Then quit carving on me." "I haven't started carving yet." She had a dry cruelty to her when she was scared. He understood that better than kindness. She cleaned the wound with hot water first, then whiskey. That was worse. White pain flashed through his body, bright enough to blind him. He grabbed the edge of the mattress and held on. Mara leaned close, working fast. Her hair had come loose from its knot. Sweat shone at her temple. She smelled like soap, iron, and sun-dried cotton. "You need stitching," she said. "Do it." "I was planning to." The needle went in. Silas stopped being proud after the third stitch. By the fifth, he was breathing through his teeth. By the seventh, the room had gone far away. He heard himself say a name he had not said in years. Fletcher. Mara's hand paused. Silas did not realize he had spoken until she leaned over him. "What did you say?" He closed his eyes. "Nothing. You said Fletcher." Fever loosened things a man spent years tying down. Silas swallowed. "I rode for him." The room changed. Not loudly. Mara did not gasp. She did not step back. But every bit of warmth left the air. "When?" "Years ago." "What did you do?" He opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling, because looking at her was too much. "What men like him pay men like me to do." Mara's face went still. "You hurt ranchers." "I scared them." "Same thing, sometimes." "Yes." The needle stayed in her hand. For one hard second, Silas thought she might drive it through his throat. He would not have blamed her. "Did you come here for him?" she asked. "No." "Did he send you?" "No." "Are you lying?" He turned his head and looked at her. "No." She held his stare for a long time. Then she tied the stitch. "Hard," Silas hissed. "Good," she said. "Means you're alive." She finished the last 2 stitches in silence, then packed the wound and wrapped his ribs tight. When she was done, her hands were trembling. She washed them again, scrubbing as if his past had gotten under her nails. "I didn't know this was your place," he said. Mara did not turn around. "You knew there were places like it." That was worse, because it was true. He had no answer. For 2 days, she spoke to him only when necessary. "Drink this. Sit up. Don't pull the stitches." Fever came and went. Sometimes he woke with Mara beside the bed, changing the cloth on his ribs. Sometimes he woke alone and heard her outside, hauling water by herself because he had made himself useless. That bothered him more than the pain. On the 3rd morning, he found her trying to lift a cracked feed sack in the barn. It had to weigh nearly 80 pounds. She had one hand under it and one knee braced against the wall. Silas stood in the doorway, one arm wrapped around his ribs. "Leave it," he said. She did not look at him. "Go lie down." "No. You tear those stitches, I'll sew them crooked out of spite." He walked over, took the sack from her, and lifted it onto the grain box. Pain bit deep into his side, but the stitches held. Mara stared at him. "You're a fool. Been told. You think lifting one sack makes anything right? No. What does then?" Silas looked around the barn. Dust floated through the light. Prophet the mule watched them with one accusing eye. "I don't know." Mara's face was unreadable. "That's the first honest thing you've said about it." She left him standing there. He went back to work slowly after that. Not because she forgave him. She did not. Not because he forgave himself. He did not know how. He worked because the trough still leaked, because the well still needed digging, because fence posts did not care what a man had done. They only cared whether he set them straight and deep. Spring had long since passed, but no rain came. The grass turned from yellow to gray. The creek bed cracked open in plates. Dust settled on every surface in the house, no matter how often Mara wiped it down. The hens stopped laying. Prophet kicked through the bottom rail of his pen and looked personally offended when Silas fixed it. The land was dying by inches. Still, the ranch changed. The barn door closed square now. The wagon rolled straight. The pump handle moved smooth. New poles held up the bean plants near the kitchen, though the leaves hung limp in the heat. The porch step no longer rocked underfoot. Small repairs, small acts of defiance. One evening, Silas came in from the well and found Mara at the table with a ledger open before her. Numbers filled the pages in tight, careful lines. She shut it when he entered. "Bad?" he asked. "Nothing in that book has been good since Caleb died. Fletcher offer money? Yes. Enough?" Her mouth twisted. "Enough to insult me." Silas washed dust from his hands in the basin. "You could take it." Mara looked at him. "I could also lie down in the yard and let the sun finish me. Doesn't mean I'm inclined to." He dried his hands. "I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant." She opened the ledger again. "He'll come soon," she said. "Not with papers this time." Silas went still. "How many men?" "Last time? 2. Time before that? 3? Depends how brave he feels." "What does he look like?" "Clean boots, soft hands, smile like a church window, eyes like a snake under a flat rock." Silas knew the type. He had worked for the type. "I can leave before he comes," Silas said. Mara's fingers tightened on the pencil. "Why?" "If he knows me, it gives him one more thing to use against you. He already has money, men, lawyers, and every coward in town willing to look the other way. I don't think one more thing will make him honest." Silas leaned against the counter. "I'm not good company when men come pushing." "No," she said. "I expect you're not." He waited. Mara looked up from the ledger. "You planning to hurt me?" "No." "You planning to steal from me?" "No." "You planning to sell me out to Fletcher?" The question sat between them. "No," Silas said. "Then quit packing your guilt like it's my burden." He looked away. Outside, thunder muttered far beyond the ridge. It did not rain. The men came 3 mornings later. Silas was in the well when he heard horses. Not 1, not 2, 4. The sound carried down the shaft, dull and uneven, hooves in dry yard dust, leather creaking, a man laughing softly at something that was not funny. Silas looked up. The well mouth was a bright white circle above him. Mara's shadow crossed it. "Stay down," she said. He could not see her face. "Mara, stay down." Then she was gone. Silas stood in the dark, with one hand on the rope, and the other pressed to his healing ribs. For 3 breaths he obeyed. Then he started climbing. By the time he pulled himself over the stones, the riders had reached the yard. Elias Fletcher sat at the front on a glossy black horse that looked better fed than any living thing on Mara's ranch. He wore a pale suit despite the dust, and somehow it was still clean. His hat was white. His gloves were tan. His smile was careful and pleasant. Behind him sat 3 men with rifles across their saddles. Not drifters. Paid men. That made them worse. Mara stood on the porch with the Winchester in her hands. She had not raised it yet. Fletcher removed his hat. "Mrs. Vale," he called. "You look well. I look busy." His smile widened. "I came to make one final offer. You wasted the ride. Now, let's not be unfriendly. This is hard country. Hard country punishes pride. It also buries thieves." One of Fletcher's men chuckled. Fletcher lifted a gloved hand, and the man went quiet. Silas moved along the side of the well, keeping low, staying behind the water barrel. His revolver was still empty. His rifle leaned inside the barn, too far away. The only weapon on him was a knife at his belt and the heavy iron well hook in his hand. Fletcher's eyes swept the yard. They stopped when he saw Silas. For a moment, the pleasant face cracked. Then it became something worse. "Well," Fletcher said, "I'll be damned." Mara did not look back. "You know him?" Fletcher asked her. "I know he works here." Fletcher laughed softly. "Is that what he told you? That he's a worker?" Silas stepped out from behind the barrel. One of the riflemen shifted in his saddle. Fletcher raised his hand again. "Easy. Mr. Creed and I are old friends." "We weren't friends," Silas said. "No, I suppose not. Friends are harder to buy." Mara's jaw moved slightly. Fletcher saw it. "Oh," he said, turning back to her. "He didn't tell you everything. He told me enough." "I doubt that." Silas walked forward slowly. His ribs pulled. His legs felt weak from the climb, but his hands were steady. Fletcher watched him with bright interest. "Last time I saw you, Silas, you were dragging a farmer out of his own house because he wouldn't sign a deed." Silas stopped. Mara's fingers tightened around the rifle. Fletcher continued, voice smooth as butter on a knife. "What was his name? Bell? Ballard? Had a daughter, I think. You remember?" Silas remembered. That was the trouble. He remembered all of them when he let himself. "I don't ride for you anymore," he said. "No, I can see you've moved up in the world." Fletcher glanced at the sagging barn, the cracked yard, the dry trough, a broken ranch and a widow with more spine than sense. Mara raised the rifle. "Leave," Fletcher sighed. "You won't shoot me, Mrs. Vale. Don't make that the first true thing you say today." His smile faded at the edges. "This land will be mine. I can pay you for it now, or I can let the bank and the county bleed you dry. Either way, you will leave." "No, your husband understood numbers poorly too." The change in Mara was small, but Silas saw it. Her eyes emptied. Her shoulder settled. Her thumb moved toward the hammer. Fletcher's men saw it too. All 3 rifles came up. Silas moved. Not fast like a young man, not clean like a gunfighter in a story. He moved like a piece of the earth had broken loose. He threw the iron hook at the nearest rifleman. It struck the man's forearm with a crack and sent the rifle flying. At the same time, Silas lunged toward Fletcher's horse, slapping its flank hard and grabbing the bridle. The black horse reared. Fletcher cursed, losing his hat. Mara fired. The shot split the morning wide open. She did not hit a man. She hit the dust in front of the second rider's horse, and the animal jumped sideways, crashing into the third. Chaos took the yard. Silas hauled Fletcher down from the saddle. The man hit the ground with an ugly grunt, all his clean clothes suddenly part of the dirt. One rifleman tried to dismount. Silas caught him by the belt and drove him shoulder first into the water barrel. The barrel burst, precious water spilling into the dust. The sight of it lit something savage in him. Water. Wasted. He slammed his fist into the man's jaw. The man dropped. Another shot rang out. Wood exploded from the porch post near Mara's head. Silas turned. The third rider had steadied his rifle and was taking aim. Silas drew his knife. He would not reach him in time. Mara fired first. The bullet struck the rifle barrel, knocking the shot wide. The rider screamed and dropped the weapon, clutching his hand. Silas reached him then. He pulled the man from the saddle and drove him into the ground. Dust rose around them. The man clawed for a pistol. Silas caught his wrist and twisted until bone threatened to give. The old part of him woke fully. It came up from under years of dust and hunger, familiar as breath. Break the wrist, take the gun, put the fear of God into the rest. Leave one man able to ride back and tell the story. He twisted harder. The man screamed. "Silas!" Mara's voice cut through the heat, not pleading, commanding. He froze. His hand still held the man's wrist at the edge of breaking. Silas looked up. Mara stood on the porch with smoke curling from the rifle barrel. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "Enough," she said. The word landed harder than any bullet. Silas let go. The man scrambled backward, sobbing, then crawled toward his horse. Fletcher had gotten to his knees. Dust covered one side of his face. Blood ran from his nose. His smile was gone now. "You think this changes anything?" he spat. "You think a hired dog can save her?" Silas walked toward him. Fletcher flinched before he could stop himself. Silas saw it. So did Mara. "I was your dog once," Silas said. "That's true." He crouched in front of Fletcher. "But dogs change when somebody gives them a door worth guarding." Fletcher stared at him with pure hatred. Silas leaned closer. "You come back here. You best bring the law, the army, and a priest to say words over whoever you bring with you." Fletcher swallowed. Silas stood. "Get off her land." Fletcher's men helped each other mount. No one looked clean now. No one looked paid enough. Fletcher climbed into his saddle with stiff, furious movements. He pointed at Mara. "This isn't over." Mara lowered the rifle slightly. "No," she said, "but it's over today." They rode out. Slow at first, then faster once they reached the road. Silence fell behind them. The yard looked worse than before. The water barrel was split open. Mud darkened the dust where the water had spilled and vanished. One porch post was chewed by a bullet. Fletcher's white hat lay trampled near the well. Silas stood in the middle of it, breathing hard. His stitches had opened. He could feel blood moving warm beneath his shirt. He did not look at Mara. He could not. The shame came after the rage, like it always did. Heavy, cold, familiar. He had shown her, not pieces, not hints, the whole thing. The trained violence, the speed of it, the pleasure of knowing exactly how to break a man and stop just short of killing him. He had thought the ranch was changing him. Maybe it had only given the animal a porch to sleep under. "I'll go," he said. Mara was quiet. Silas walked toward the barn. "I'll bind this up, take my gear, and be gone before dark." "Why?" The question stopped him. He turned. Mara had stepped down from the porch. The rifle hung at her side now. "You saw what I am," Silas said. "Yes." The simple answer hurt more than fear would have. "I used to work for men like him. I know. I hurt people. I know that too." His throat tightened. Then why ask why? Mara looked at the broken water barrel, then at the fence he had mended, the barn door he had squared. the well stones dark with the clay he had dug out by hand. Because leaving won't unhurt them. Silas had no answer. Mara came closer. I don't need a clean man, Silas. Clean men pass by places like this and talk about pity. Then they ride on before the real work starts. He looked down. I'm not asking for pity. No, you're asking for punishment, because it feels easier than staying. That struck too close. His jaw tightened. You should be scared of me. I am scared, Mara said. He looked up. She held his eyes. I'm scared of drought. I'm scared of men with money who can buy truth by the pound. I'm scared of fever and rusted nails and empty barrels. I'm scared every morning when I count how much water is left. She stepped closer. But I am not scared of the man who crawled out of a well half dead to stand between my porch and Elias Fletcher. Silas felt something inside him shift. Not heal, not yet, but shift. Mara pointed toward the pump. Wash your hands. You've got blood on them. He almost smiled, but his face would not manage it. That bother you? Yes, she said. I just cleaned the table. She turned and walked into the house, leaving the door open. Silas stood in the yard for a long time. Then he went to the pump and washed. The water came slow. Each stroke of the handle gave only a thin stream, but he used as little as he could. Blood and dust ran off his hands and disappeared into the dirt. Inside, Mara had put coffee on. He stood at the threshold. She was at the stove. Back to him, stirring something in a pan. Bacon, or what was left of it. The smell filled the room, rich and ordinary and almost unbearable. You coming in? She asked. Silas touched the doorframe. I'll bleed on the floor. There's a rag by the basin. He stepped inside. The house seemed smaller than it had that morning. Or maybe he had become more aware of how much it meant to be allowed into it. He cleaned the blood from his side as best he could. Mara checked the stitches without asking permission. 2 had torn. She made a disgusted sound and sewed them again while he sat at the table gripping the edge. You did that on purpose, he muttered. If I did, you'd know. When she finished, she set a plate in front of him. Beans, bacon, fried potatoes cut thin and crisp around the edges. He stared at it. Mara sat across from him with her own plate. Neither of them said grace. Neither of them said thank you. Some things were too small for what had happened. Silas picked up his fork. The chair held under his weight because he had fixed it 3 days before. Outside, thunder rolled again. Closer this time. Mara looked toward the window. Clouds had gathered over the western ridge, dark and swollen. The light in the room changed, turning silver around the edges. May not come, she said. Silas followed her gaze. May. They ate while the wind rose. Dust hit the windows first, then leaves from the cottonwood by the creek bed. Then came the smell. Rain. Real rain. Not memory. Not promise. Not some cruel scent carried from miles away. The first drop hit the roof like a pebble, then another. Then the sky opened. Rain slammed down so hard it erased the yard. It ran off the porch in sheets. It filled the broken places in the dust. It struck the tin roof in a wild, steady roar that made talking useless. Mara stood slowly. She walked to the open door and watched the rain. Silas stood beside her, leaving space between them. The yard turned black and shining. The well stones drank. The cracked trough filled with muddy water. Fletcher's trampled hat flattened under the downpour until it looked like nothing. Mara's face did not change much, but her hand went to the doorframe and held there. Silas looked at that hand. Red knuckles, work cuts, no ring. He wanted to say something that would fix what he had been. No words came. That was probably for the best. After a while, Mara spoke without looking at him. Ground will soften, yes. Fence posts by the lower pasture need setting deeper before the wash comes. I'll do it. Not tonight. No. Tomorrow. Silas nodded. Tomorrow. She looked at him then. You still planning to leave before dark? Rain hammered the roof. Silas looked out at the land, at the barn, at the well, at the fence line fading behind the curtain of water, at the place that had given him work before it gave him peace. No, he said. Mara nodded once, as if that settled a matter of weather or livestock. Good. One man can't deepen a well alone. She went back to the table and poured 2 cups of coffee. Silas stayed by the door a moment longer. He had spent most of his life moving from one hard place to another, telling himself that distance was the same as freedom. He had slept under wagons, in jail cells, beside dying fires, and once in a ditch while men searched the road for him with lanterns. He had been called outlaw, gun hand, bastard, killer, and worse things by men who were not wrong. But no one had ever called him necessary. Mara did not say it in soft words. She would never make it easy on him like that. She said it with work, with a cup of water, with a place at the table. With an open door, after seeing the worst of him, Silas took off his hat and hung it on the peg beside the door. It looked strange there, like it had been waiting for that spot. He walked to the table and sat across from Mara. She pushed 1 cup of coffee toward him. Their fingers did not touch. Outside, rain beat the dry country back to life. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, bacon grease, wet dust, and old wood. Silas wrapped both hands around the cup. Mara opened the ledger and turned it toward him. There's a list, she said. Things that need doing before Fletcher comes back. Silas looked down at the page. The handwriting was small and tight. Fence, well, barrel, roof, ammunition, seed, axle, lower gate, smokehouse lock. A whole life, written as repairs. He picked up the pencil. Mara watched him. After a moment, he added 1 more line at the bottom. 2nd cup. Mara read it. For the first time since he had arrived, she almost smiled. Almost. That a request? She asked. Silas looked at the rain, then at the cup beside his hand. No, he said. Just planning ahead. She took the pencil from him and drew a firm line under the list. The storm kept coming, and for once, neither of them feared the sound of it. Because the roof held, the door held, the chair held, and so did the quiet agreement between them. Not love, not yet, not forgiveness, not completely, not the kind of clean ending people tell in towns where the streets are swept and the wells never run dry. It was something rougher than that. A bargain made of water, work, blood, and staying. Silas had come to Mara's ranch as a dying man looking to steal 1 drink and disappear into the heat. He stayed because the well was deep, the land was stubborn, and the woman who owned both had looked straight at the worst parts of him and handed him a shovel anyway. Sometimes that is how a man begins again, not with a speech, not with a prayer, not with someone telling him he is good, but with a hard piece of ground, a job that needs doing, and one person who believes he might show up tomorrow and do it. What do you think Silas really found on Mara's ranch? Was it redemption, or just a place where his violence finally had a purpose? And do you think Mara was right to let him stay after learning the truth about his past? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy raw, grounded Western stories about broken people surviving together, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more.